Right, sorry. Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. We're back for the last session of this Bootcamp series, the Exploit Tech program organized by Parakletus Hub Nigeria. And here with me is Nimo Raji, my co-host that comes around once in a while, and I have the speaker, Mr. Ishola Precious, the CEO and co-founder of Wilemo.com. So, without wasting much of our time, because we're already starting a little bit late, I would love that Mr. Precious introduces himself, and then we can go on from there. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Um, just a quick check again. Okay. All right. Can you hear me clearly?
Yeah, we
Can
can hear
everyone
you
hear?
perfectly.
Okay, good. Yeah. All right. So thank you so much. Thank you for having me here. It's indeed a honor and a pleasure to be here to just share with you. Thank you so much. All right. Okay. So do I have permission to share my screen and start my presentation?
Yes, you just do a little bit of introduction about yourself, and then the speakers get to introduce
Okay.
themselves. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm
Yes,
speaking
actually.
about. Okay, so my name is Precious Ishola. Like like stated already, um, I'm a business developer. I have an engineering background. Actually, I come from an engineering background. Uh, Studied mechanical engineering. Dabbled into IoT engineering too, and yeah, a lot of that. So, but majorly, I have so much passion in entrepreneurship and specifically social entrepreneurship. I have so much interest in seeing how we can build innovations that would solve societal problems, that would solve societal issues, basically. So I think that's why I'm here today. Actually, that's why I one of the reasons why I actually kickstarted Elemo, and I'll be sharing more on that in a bit actually. But majorly, that's what I do. That's why I'm a social entrepreneur, business developer, and also an engineer. And currently, I run an e-learning platform for secondary school students across the English-speaking West Africa countries. Basically, we launched in 2018, and majorly what we're trying to do is we are trying to help students prepare for matriculation examination and help students in both in underserved communities and even urban areas in Nigeria and Africa gain access to higher education because we believe it is needed for the future of work and for us to grow as a continent and even as individual countries. Yeah, so I think I've done justice to that, and yeah.
All right. We can start with the presentation right now, and after that, we'll go to the question and the answer. Yeah, let's just head on with that straight up, because I feel
All
like the
right.
question
Okay.
and the
Thank
answer is
you.
going to be very, very interesting today. Yeah, really, really
Oh,
going to be interesting.
okay, good.
Right.
All right.
So, sir, you can start the presentation.
Yeah, I will just share my screen now shortly.
Okay.
Just trying to give me a moment. Okay. All right. Just a moment. Okay, good. Yep. All right. So let me know if you can see my screen. Currently sharing slide. Okay, so let me know as soon as it comes up.
Okay.
Can you see it?
No, the slide it's not up yet.
Oh, it's not up yet. Oh, okay. Okay, let me do a quick refresh. Because it's up here. Can Um, okay, so I think you are here to add me to the broadcast. You are here to add the other device I joined with to the broadcast. Can you do that? So right on the other device, I'm still on the. Okay, good, good, good. All right, good. Can you see the screen now? Can you see my slide now? Hello,
Yes, I can
hello.
see your screen. I can
Oh,
see
okay.
your
All right,
screen.
good.
Please continue.
All
Yeah.
right. Okay, good. Yeah. Okay. All right. So thank you once again for having me here. Um, so I will be speaking on specifically on pedagogy trends actually. So I know the theme of this event is deploying technology to solving Africa's education problems, and over the course of excuse me, please, over the course of the few days that this program has started, there has been, I mean, we've had a lot of wonderful and amazing speakers. I've had to catch up on a lot of the sessions myself, and I mean, I can say that the speakers have done a lot of great work and justice to the team actually. So I think at this moment it's just expedient of me to really talk on certain pedagogy trends that we need to take care of, that we need to be aware of, and then that we need to start seeing how we can implement them basically. So to start with, why should we? I mean, why do we need this at this point in time? So in our country alone, in Nigeria alone, the Nigeria is now the capital of the out of school children. That means we have about 15 million children who are out of school in Nigeria alone. Now globally, worldwide, there are about over 90 million children who are out of school. So if Nigeria is just accounting for just 15 million out of those children, and Nigeria is still the world capital of out of school children. Not even India, there's I mean a billion people in population, not even China. Nigeria is the capital. So there's a lot we need to do. Like there's a lot we need to do. There's a whole lot we need to do. And our current educational system cannot sustain the weight, cannot fulfill the demands it's having currently. And there's also this disparity between the industry and the education industry. I mean, the industry in terms of the work industry, the professional industry basically, and then the school system. There's so much disparity, and this is what we always, I mean, this is a subject we can go on around to take all the day to talk about. So there's so much disparity, and the industry in itself is accelerating at a very very high speed compared to the education system. So for instance, we still use the same old methods largely in our education system, and there's so much imbalance between the academics and then the industry out there. So there's a lot we need to do, because if we don't start doing something now, then the growing population will be unequipped, especially for the future of work. So in my own field where I currently operate in, what we do at Ilemo, like I mentioned earlier, we're trying to help students gain admission to university, gain access to higher education by passing their matriculation examination. So in Nigeria alone, for instance, close to 1 million secondary school students fail at least one of their matriculation examinations every year. That, I mean, I'm talking about 1 million students. Last year, 1.1 million students failed the JAMB exam. That's the UTME, a matriculation examination in Nigeria. Out of the 1.3 million students who took the exam, that's an 86% failure rate. I don't think there's any country where you have an 86% failure rate for its matriculation exam. Not, this is not a school exam. This is not a semester exam. This is a school exam. I mean, this is a matriculation exam, like a certificate examination as at that. So there's so much we need to do in the education industry, and it's not just about the pre-K industry, that is from the kindergarten to grade 12 education sector. We also need to talk about the vocational aspects of our education, the vocational part of edtech as a whole. We talk about the post-secondary school education, and we even need to start talking about lifelong learning. This is learning beyond the walls of schools. So there's so much we need to do actually, and like I mentioned earlier, this current academic system, the current academic practices cannot meet the demand it's going to have in the next few years. It can't sustain the demand. It can't sustain the weight that it's currently have. Let's just dive into it straight. Let's just dive into it quickly. So, in the Observatory of Education Innovations Worldwide, they did a research and then they identified certain trends when it comes to learning. Then they identify certain trends when it comes to learning. So we are going to take this in two parts. We talk about trends in learning, and then we'll talk about trends in assessment. So they did it. They carried out a research, and then so these were like the top five trends that they could see, and then they discovered in learning. One is the challenge-based learning. The other is the project-based learning, and then we also have the flipped learning, experiential learning, and then flexible learning. So these top five are like the trends, and then I'm just going to explain, and I'm going to dive into each one of them, and then we'll be able to see why, number one, why we need to start embracing these trends, and then the advantages it brings, and then of course the uniqueness of each of these trends, because they are unique in their own. And then it's not a one size fits all model, right? It's not like, okay, we need to just take one of these trends, and then uh, we need to start seeing how can we apply each of these trends to different fields, because they have their own peculiarities, right? And of course, as I go on with the presentation, you understand all of this in details. So let's start with challenge-based learning. Challenge-based learning. Now, when we talk about challenge-based learning, we are talking about a form of learning where students are tasked with the responsibility of identifying a challenge within their community. Teachers or the facilitator put the students in groups, and then they get to identify a challenge. So, for instance, when it comes to identifying challenge, right here in our country, in Nigeria, where we have quite a lot of challenges in our country and all. So, for instance, let's just pick one random challenge. And there was a research actually that was carried out. So, one they got students to walk around how they can reinvent the bottles of pet, the cap of pet bottles. I think I have one here, something like this. They worked on how can you reinvent this, for instance. So when it comes to challenge-based learning, we bring in the principle of design thinking, because you need to start thinking of, okay, who are the users of this? So if I'm trying to reinvent this cap of a pet bottle, this bottle cap, I'll start thinking about the users. I have to bring in design thinking. I'll start thinking about the users. I'll start thinking, okay, what challenges are they facing? And then how can we empathize with the users, and then how can we go from there to test out, to develop a prototype that we can test and then keep on iterating. So when you have challenge-based learning, one thing it does is that it helps the student to have a deeper knowledge in the field. It helps them to have a deeper knowledge in whatever thing it is you're teaching. So in this case, let's say a teacher or a facilitator or a lecturer has been taking students on CAD, that's computer-aided designs. And then let's imagine an engineering course, for instance. So and this after this engineering course, you bring in a challenge-based learning where students are to redesign the cap of a pet bottle. So one thing they will start doing, of course, to start with a group of students, one thing they will do is, number one, to try to empathize with the users, try to see, okay, what are the challenges inherent with this bottle cap? And then how can we go from there? How can we use what we've learned in our class, that is the computer-aided design softwares, to design another type of cap bottles? And after designing it, how can we fabricate it? How can we test it out? And then how can we take it out there to the people, to the customers, or to the users, or to the people who are affected by this particular challenge? And so that way, the students get to have a deeper knowledge than just merely teaching them theory and all of that. And one thing challenge-based learning also does is that it births a form of responsibility in the students. They become much more responsible, because they are able to take their learning in classroom to apply it and then apply it to a challenge in the community, and then so they become more responsible, they become more productive in their thinking process and in all that they do, and they see that their education, their schooling is not just limited to them getting a certificate and all of that. So let's move on quickly. The next uh, area we'll talk about is, come just a moment, let me, is project-based learning. Project-based learning. So in this form of learning, students are tasked with the responsibility of designing and developing a project. So it could be any form of projects, of course, related to their learning. So in this situation, one thing that happens is that there is collaboration. Students get to collaborate. They get to form groups. They get to work together. Of course, they get guides on how to go about all of the all what they need to develop and all of that. They have guides here. Unlike the challenge-based learning, they get guides from their teachers, from their facilitators, or whoever is taking them at all. But one thing project-based learning does is that it bridges the gap between theory and practical. So, for instance, think of let's okay so let's give an example under the engineering and science field. So think about a student that has learned about thermal conductivity, and then you just crammed. One thing I knew we used to do in secondary school then was that my chemistry classes would cram colors uh, of the final product of experiments. So for instance, there's what we call the flame test. So that is what happens when you apply heat to a certain substance. So let's say you apply it to a particular substance, let's say potassium, for instance, that then change from blue to green. So the result of the flame test now is green, right? And then we would cram that, and that's quite barbaric. That's quite a lot of work, because if we had carried out the flame test ourselves, we won't need to cram, right? We won't need to start memorizing what is the color of this, what is the flame test of this, and all of that. So that's one thing project-based learning does. One thing it does, it bridge the gap between theory and practical, and then it creates interest in the students. It helps them to understand, it helps them to learn better, it creates so much interest. They have much joy in their learning process, and then they are more uh, you have more enthusiasm towards learning, and then the classroom, the education and schooling does not look boring again. Just imagine an architect that has been drawing a lot of building plans, he has been drawing a lot of plans, drawing a lot of plans, and then if after a while, finally sees his building is come to life, like being built by civil engineers and people in the building and construction industries. There's a joy it brings that, oh, I've been doing this thing in the theory form. I've been trying to draw different plans and do all of this and all, and then seeing it come to life, it just brings you so much joy. Same thing with learning, same thing with project-based learning. It brings you so much joy, it brings you so much interest when it comes to learning for this on behalf of the student. So that's one trend. Then the next trend is the flipped learning. This is very, very common, but not we don't really let me say we don't really practice it as much as we should and in the way we should. So when it comes to flipped learning is basically leveraging video in terms of, so how it works is that a teacher or a facilitator creates develop their tutorials or their teaching into a video, and then the students go ahead to build the video, they go to watch the video, and then what happens after that is that they come back to the classroom for for questions, for classworks, for research and all of that. So one thing this trend does is that it saves time, and then it saves cost, like drastically. So on an average, teachers or facilitators spend about half of their teaching period to dictate notes to their students or to write it on the board. I mean, this is a trend that is even, I mean, not a trend. This is a practice that is common even in our university. You have lecturers come to the class to dictate notes or to write notes on the board. So you spend half of your teaching period to write notes, to give notes to your students. But imagine that these students could have these notes in form of PDF or as a video content. That way, you're able to save about half of your period. Now, if we can apply this practice, this model to every classes from the pre-K to the grade 12, for instance, does that mean that we could probably cut the years it takes to finish up a secondary school education and a primary school education? I mean, that's a food for thought. That's something you should think about, because you spending about half of the time to write note on the board, and the students would copy it again. That's wasting time, and that's wasting time, right? That's wasting time, right? It's wasting lots of time, right? And so with flip learning, students have the content ready. You don't have to waste resources. You don't have to waste paper, because you're not only wasting time, you're wasting cost. So with flip learning, you don't have to waste time for paper, for pen, for notebooks. You don't have to waste time. You have to waste the resources in terms of markers and boards and chalkboards, and that you don't have to waste all of that. So you've already saved half of your period, half of your teaching period, and then the students go. So the students have the content either in video format or in text format, PDF, and all that. They go through the content, they learn, they do everything into that. And then when they come back to the classroom, you have more time now for collaboration. So this trend of learning will really work well in fields or in courses where students need to do a lot of research. Like there are specific fields like that where students need to do a lot of research. They need to spend a lot of time to keep on probably viewing more applications or learning more about applications of the course or their study, for instance. So with this model, it brings in more time. So you have more time to discuss, you have more time for research. Teachers can do more. It saves the teachers stress, it saves them a lot of time. Right, so that's something about flip learning. And of course, I should be quick to say that there are some drawbacks, there are some challenges to actually adopting this mode of learning. That's in terms of hardware. Of course, now the challenge would be that not every student would have access to, not every student have access to a hardware, for instance, that is a phone where they can view a video content, all of that. But I think we should be at the front foot of seeing how we can how we can keep on improving our pedagogy, how we can keep on improving our system of learning, right? So even though there's the challenge of hardware and all of that, we should still see we can still work on something. We can still leverage, let's say, text. We can have PDF, or even if it's printed materials. As far as, I mean, if you can save half of the teacher's period, half of your time to dictate notes, if you can print out the notes for the students to have, I mean, you are saving a lot of time. So students who have challenges, for instance, can come back. I mean, can have more time to ask questions and improve their weakness. Yeah, so I spent so much time on this because it's something that we really need to embrace. Like we need to stop writing notes on board for students to come. We need to stop dictating notes. Uh, it's a redundant process, basically. Yeah. So let me move on quickly. So we have experiential learning. When it comes to experiential learning, it's basically a form of learning where so now this is a form of learning that can be adapted in the social science class and in the humanities. I know I've talked a lot about I've made a lot of examples of people in the engineering field. I've made a lot of examples of people in the engineering field, people in the science field, and all. But this experiential learning can be adapted in the social science field, in the humanities field, in the arts field. So in this form of learning, you're creating an experience around the course. You're creating an experience around the teaching, around what you're teaching the students. So in this form of learning, for instance, you are putting yourself in the shoes of your case study. So something that people in the social science classes do a lot in the social science field, rather, is they distribute questionnaires in order to be able to understand how a set of people are learning, or how a set of people are behaving, or to understand them better. For instance, so let's say, for instance, we're trying to assess the let's say we're trying to assess the impact that rural to urban migration have on the education of children. I'm just thinking this up, for instance. Let's say we're trying to assess the impact of migrating from the rural to the urban area of families have on their kids. So one thing we can do is we can distribute questionnaires and get everybody to fill in, okay, ask about 200 questions and all of that. Or we can decide to come from our comfort zone and start living with these people, start living with them, start doing the same job they're doing, start interacting with them. So that way we are experiencing it. Actually, we're experiencing what we are supposed to be learning and trying to get data on. I mean, trying to get responses on and all of that. So this way you have you're not just getting feedback that is not authentic. I mean, we know what we do to questionnaires. I mean, so this way you are getting all feedback, you are experiencing things yourself and all. You are walking in the shoes of your case study and all of that. So this is something that we can consider for people, for professionals and students in the arts and social science field, basically. Now, the next trend in learning is flexible learning. So in this case, you create a system whereby students can choose when they want to learn, they can choose where they want to learn, they can choose how they want to learn. So they can get to choose a lot of modes, different modes of learning. They can choose so this learning is targeted towards the specific needs of each student. So they can decide to schedule when they want to learn. If they want to do part-time, they can decide to schedule their speed. They can decide to schedule if they want to learn a particular course in 2 months, or if they want to do it in 3 months, or if they want to do it in 1 month. So this way, you create a lot of personalization for the students, and you make things flexible for them, basically, as the name suggests. And one area this trendy learning can actually work well is in the area of so there are certain courses, right? There are certain fields of courses that have a lot of areas of specialization, like they have sub areas of specialization, and it's very hard for you to get all the students to learn everything. I mean, it's going to take a lot of time, right? So one thing you can do is you can have like an introductory content, right? You have an introductory content to expose the student to the field, to expose the student to what you're trying to teach them. And then after the introductory content, students now have the choice to choose the area of specialization that they want to go into, that they want to focus on. So that's one area of area that flexible learning can be applied to. Yeah. So let's move on. Now we've talked about trends in learning already. So I'll do a quick recap. We talked about flexible learning, talked about experiential learning, talked about flipped learning, we talked about project-based learning, and then we also talked about challenge-based learning. So now finally, let's talk about trends in assessment, right? Let's talk about trends in assessment. To start with, um, the usual thing we do when it comes to assessing students, when it comes to assessing uh, students or generally, is what we call assessment of learning, right? And the way this works is that after a semester or after a session, mostly after a semester, right, or after a term or after a module, we bring in multiple choice questions or quiz for the students, and then ask them, okay, I mean, a series of questions, either theory or practical, wherever form, right? But the drawbacks to this mode of assessment is that uh, for students who are weak in certain areas, after assessing their learning, there's little help. There's little help you can offer them after assessing their learning. So, for instance, imagine a secondary school student, or imagine a primary school student after who got assessed after their first time, and then the student had about 60%, or let's say 55% as a pass mark. So it's a pass mark, right? It's a pass mark to either promote the primary one student to primary two student. But at that point in time, you can't go back to start teaching the student the 45% uh, topics, let's say, or the 45% areas where they failed. So there's little you can do after assessing the students, or in some cases, it might even be failure. Let's say the student had 20% and the student had to repeat the class. That means students have spent another year uh, taking lectures again, and that's a lot of wasted time. So there are two major forms of assessment that solves this problem. One is assessment in learning. This basically means assessing the students in real time as they're learning, ensuring that they are being assessed. So for every topic you are teaching them, you are assessing them. So that way, a teacher is able to quickly give feedback. The teacher is able to quickly give feedback to the student. So in this form of learning, you are not waiting till the students are done uh, for the time or done with the semester before assessing them, and then there's little or nothing you can do for the student that failed. In this form of assessment, students are constantly being assessed. So that way, the teacher already knows where to come in before taking the final examination. The teacher knows what he or she needs to do. The teacher already knows what the students have mastered. The teachers already know what the students have areas they have weakness in. So this form of assessment, it gives us surprises. So when you finally do an assessment at the end of the learning, you are not surprised. I mean, you won't have any, there won't be any surprise elements based on the performance of the students, because you've been assessing them, you've been helping them along the way, you've already know each student's strength and weakness. And this form of assessment also provide personalized learning, right? And with technologies like AI or data science, you can even predict the test scores of your students before they go out to take an exam, before they go out to take a test, and do all of that. So that's one. Those are the advantages of assessment and learning. And then finally, we have assessment as learning. So they go hand in hand: assessment in learning and assessment as learning. This is a form of assessment where uh, you constantly use the result of assessing the students to teach the students, right? So in this form of assessment, let's say after a topic or after a subtopic, you assess your students, and then you discover that, oh, let's say they need a prerequisite. Let's say in mathematics, you assess your student on bearing. Bearing is a topic in math. For those who are in the field, let's say you assess your student on bearing, and then you do an assessment immediately. That's assessment in learning, right? And then you discover that, oh, your students have issues in using Pythagoras theorem. So that way, you got an assessment, right? You got the result of the assessment, and the result of the assessment was that, oh, the students actually have issues. They have difficulties in using Pythagoras theorem, which is a prerequisite to bearing as a topic, right? So that way, you're able to use the assessment, right? The assessment you got as a form of learning for your students or whoever it is that's on your platform. So as a teacher or as a facilitator, you know that, oh, what I need to do now is to teach my students Pythagoras theorem, so that they know that prerequisite, and then they can go on to take uh, lectures, and I mean, they can go on to proceed to learn about bearing and even take tests and assessment on bearing. So that is basically what assessment as learning does. So as a whole, as stakeholders in the education field, we need, as teachers, as facilitators, wherever area you find yourself in the education space, we need to start embracing these trends, right? We need to start embracing these trends. I started talking about how this educational system cannot support the demands right now. It can't support the demands right now. And with these trends, we can be able to leverage technology to reach more people, to provide quality education to more people, to make quality education affordable and even accessible to students and to people in wherever areas. And what I'm saying, this trends of learning is applicable in every form of learning, from vocational learning to the formal education to even skill acquisition and all of that. It is applicable to every form of learning, right? Yeah, so let's do a quick recap. So in terms of trends in assessment, I talked about assessment as learning, I talked about assessment in learning, and I talked about assessment of learning. Yeah, so that will be all from me. I hope you got a thing or two. You got to learn a thing or two in trends in education, and wherever you find yourself, like I said, I hope you'll be able to see how you can embrace one of these trends. Yeah, so thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Here are my contact details.
Wow.
You can reach out to me. I'm available on almost all social media and all. Yeah, so once again, thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, sir. We really appreciate. Can you hear me, please? Can you hear me, please?
Yes, I
Hello.
can hear you clearly.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that short lecture learning basically because I think you just wrapped it up for you because I remember we started out talking about understanding um, the education system in Nigeria and in Africa at large. Then we moved from that to talking about how we can engage technology to solve this problem. Then we moved to the importance of understanding the role of all major stakeholders in the entire picture. And now we're talking about the essence of understanding how learning works basically. So Without wasting much time, bring up my I would love to bring up my co-host, Miss Nima, to if to ask her question to this. Thank you, Nima.
All right. Thank you very much. I'd just like to commend you for the well done program you've given us, the enlightenment and all. So I just have few questions to ask you. Now, you know that being technology inclusive would be a great contribution to our education. Okay, so what about the capital? Like, how are we going to get this done? There are several schools we have in the country. Like, who exactly are we supposed to hold responsible for this, and what exactly, who should we depend on to get this done? So that's the first question.
Okay. Do I take all the questions or do I just go now?
Yeah, you can answer them one by one.
Okay. So, well, like I mentioned earlier, this is something um or I mean, this is a call to all the stakeholders in the industry, right, in the education space, from the NGOs to the government, to the people in the research space, the academicians, to entrepreneurs, to even startup founders. Basically, it's not a one man job, right? It's so we always say that education is the bedrock of development of a country. That's a general, and that's something we say. So if education is the bedrock of development, then it needs as many hands as possible to support it, right? I mean, imagine the foundation of a building. You need as much strength and as much you need so much strength, right? So much there has to be so much consolidation in the foundation of any building. So it's something we all need to do, right? So from the government will do what they can, right? They will make policies. They can create learning centers, for instance. The NGOs too can create learning centers for people to learn for free. Startup founders that is businesses in the education space, would work on how they can make hardware, that is phones or technology, more affordable for people, right? So everybody would have to. It's going to be a collaborative work, right? Something that everybody will have to do, right? It's not just a one man's job. So we need as many stakeholders as possible in this field, like in this space, basically. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you very much. So now that brings me to another question. Not everybody is technologically advanced. There are some students, teachers who probably don't even know how to use the laptop. Okay. So what steps are we to take to, like, how are we supposed to get them to know that, okay, to enlighten the people? There are several people in the rural areas. There are students in public schools that don't even know what they want to do. Okay, now if you have exams and they want to use the laptop, and then there are some students that are being stuck, what should we do about this?
So the thing is, we have to start from somewhere, right? One thing COVID, the pandemic, taught us was that uh, so the pandemic brought a disruption in learning globally, actually, like a big disruption, a lockdown, learning, all of that. So one thing the pandemic taught everyone is that we need to embrace lifelong learning. That's something we don't really talk about in this part of the world. But now we need to know that we need to embrace lifelong learning. That is, we need to keep on learning. So prior to the pandemic, there were a lot of teachers, right? I mean, specifically a lot of teachers, facilitators, people who don't know how to use video conferencing app like Zoom, Google Meet, and what have you. But when the pandemic came and then they saw the need to adjust and all that, they started learning. So that's something we need to embrace. So as a teacher and even as a person, I'm constantly in the edge of learning about trends, about advancement in the education space, seeing how these trends, not just for the fun of the trends or for the fun of technology, but seeing how these trends can help us to make our work easier, our work better, and help us to reach more students effectively. So that's something we need to embrace. We need to embrace lifelong learning. You need to set aside the fact that, okay, I have um, this number of qualifications in education space as a teacher. I have this qualification, I have this. You need to start researching start learning. If you need to pay for a training, pay. If you need to attend a paid conference, please do pay for it. If you need to subscribe to online courses, please do. Once you guys are doing that, I think right after this program, you're going to have a skill acquisition. You're going to have a skill acquisition training for people, right? So that's something we can't just confine learning to the four walls of the school building or the university building, or the four walls of a building. We need to embrace lifelong learning. Sign up for courses. Sign up for courses just to ensure that you keep on learning, keep on getting better. So that's it actually. Lifelong learning. That's the one word.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, so you mentioned something about lecturers giving students PDF files or printed materials. Now, there was a case actually that someone was like, okay, if I give you this PDF file, if I give you this printed material, it's not allowed the students to concentrate or even take the course seriously. Like they will just collect the file and then just throw it somewhere. But if they write it themselves, it will actually give them the motivation to read and all. So do you think this what the person is saying is actually justifiable or what?
Well, that's a lie. That's a big lie. That's a big lie. We've been doing the same thing for years, and then we recorded so much failure rate. I talked about how we had 86% failure rate in the hello, can you hear me clearly?
Yes, you're audible.
Okay, good. Talk about how we had, a 6% failure rate in the matriculation examination. I can tell you that for all of those students, their teachers or the tutors dictated notes, for them, or wrote it on the board. So, it doesn't bring concentration, right? Writing notes, and then writing notes at the point where you are writing notes, or where the student is writing notes, there's no assimilation. That's the truth. And even when it comes to copying notes and taking notes, everybody has different speed, and then the teacher doesn't consider that most of the time. The facilitator won't consider that. Once they're done dictating the notes or writing, they would start with explanation. And you can't you there's no how you can write and assimilate at the same time. So it's a big fallacy, and it's just a big lie that, oh, student won't concentrate. No, that's not it actually. So one thing I mentioned is that after giving the student notes, right, in the flipped classroom learning, it's not, you don't just give them notes and then say, there you have a time where you discuss, where students ask questions. So in those period in time, at those sessions, you can now start measuring the effectiveness of what you do. That is, you will be able to assess which student is concentrating and which student is not concentrating. So you have more time now. So you even have more time to help students who are weak. That is, who are weak in a particular area. Do you understand? So the flipped classroom model gives you more time to actually help students, compared to the usual model where you spend half of the time to even copy. And sometimes the time is not even enough. Sometimes students people use their break time to copy notes. They will use the time they are meant to read and study to copy notes. So it's a practice you should start thinking about we can eradicate.
All right, thank you very much. So to the last question, you said okay, copy notes and all a lot of students failed. Now to the flexible learning, in my university now too, when I entered, we actually did a lot of online learning and all. So students actually blamed this online learning that it allowed them to fail because there's actually mass failure and all. So like what exactly is it that we are to merge the both together, technology, physical classes and all. And also it's will bring forth maybe like feeling of isolation, then lack of discipline, malpractice at some point. So what can you like tell the students that okay, oh, fine, being tech inclusive will actually help you in this and that. Then also, I mean, a lot of students actually prefer their normal classrooms. They just want to be with their friends and all. So, what word of encouragement do you have for them? And that will be the last question. Okay.
Okay, so when it comes to deploying any of these trends of learning, um, So, like I mentioned earlier, the point of technology in learning is to enhance learning, right? We shouldn't just embrace technology because it's fun or because it's cool, right? So, and then one thing I mentioned is that each of these trends and forms of learning have their own applications. They have their own unique applications. So you can't just pick any one of them and say, "Oh, I want to go with this," right? So I think it boils down to the facilitators themselves, right? The educators themselves. So wherever mode of learning you want to um, deploy, or whatever form of learning you want to start, you need to ensure that it changes and improves your current pedagogy. So if it's not going to help, like it's not going to make what you've been doing better, there's no point adopting it, right? So at the end of the day, it's not just taking one fragment, right? It's not just taking one fragment of online learning. You need to be holistic in the process. You need to ensure that you're able to either retain the same quality of teaching that you'll be given in the usual form of learning, that is the on-site form of learning, in the online. So it's not just you adopting technology and then just stopping there, right? What a lot of educators fail to do is that they fail to set in to put in systems in place that ensure that the quality of teaching in the on-site learning is retained. That's something we need to consider. You either retain the quality or you increase the quality. Do you understand? So it's not just enough to copy, to open a WhatsApp group to tell your students to stop coming to classes and then open a WhatsApp group and start teaching them. No, you need to ensure that you are retaining the quality of what you have before. So that's something educators need to do. So I think it's more of what the educators needs to do themselves. That is the teachers. It's more of what they need to do themselves than students are more at the receiving end because wherever they have to comply wherever system is put forward by the education institution, right? So it's more about the educators themselves. So, yeah,
Wow. Um, that was quite some questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Precious.
yeah. Thank you.
I just have a few. Yeah, I just have a few things to say, and then maybe one or two questions to ask. So, we were talking about how it's important that all major stakeholders come together to solve the problem of cost and quality. It has been something that we've been talking about for quite some time. In fact, Mrs. Joy Chichi is actually talked about that. You are talking about it now, and so a lot of people. These are things that we've established at the course of this program. But then a question just popped up in my mind when we were talking about how the instructor or the teacher is supposed to put systems in place to ensure that these technologies that are in place does not actually have a downturn on the performance of the student. Now it gets me to ask, is it entirely on the instructor? What about platforms that don't have systems that enable quality teaching and learning delivery or teaching delivery? What about them? What about yeah, there are some platforms like that. So what about them? What will you say about this? Is it okay? Because the way you put it, it sounded like it was just the instructors that are like they have the finance say they have to put systems in place. But I believe that there are some e-learning platforms that actually do not give like what their platform is serving does not encourage quality teaching delivery. So what would you say about that? Considering also that you are an edtech, you are into edtech particularly. So please, what would you say about that? Because I personally have experienced platforms that being taught with platforms that sorry being taught with platforms that like are really not encouraging at all. Like they're very bad. So what do you have to say about that? Sir? That's the last thing, and then call it a wrap for today.
Um, so I'm not sure I got your question well, but if I'm going to recap, you talked about what we can do, maybe as a student or as a learner, when you're learning on platforms that do have quality content or something. Is that what you said? Is that the
No,
question?
Yeah, I think the question is in two ways. First of all, is it just dependent on the instructor? Then, secondly, as an edtech founder or as an edtech entrepreneur, what will you tell other edtech entrepreneurs or startups that are creating solutions that are like solutions that are solving challenges we're facing in Africa? And then, yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah. Well, so when it comes to structure, when it comes to system, at the end of the day, um, the the company or the institution is entirely responsible for the structure you put in place. So the question is, uh, don't push out something you know is not good, right? Don't push out something you know is not going to have a good impact on people. So I think that's the question of system and structure. Then when it comes to content and a lot of that, Bill Gates, the of course we all know Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, richest man in the world, or maybe one time richest man in the world. He has this quote that is very profound, simple but profound. It says, "Content is king in everything. Content is king.
Mm,
Like in every area, in every sector, content is king." So beyond the fancy or the coolness of technology, what really powers edtech innovations or a learning platform is your content. So as an edtech founder or anyone in the education space, you need to pay attention to your content because content is king at the end of the day. You might have a nice looking learning platform, you might have a good sales pitch to drive people to your platform, you might have a good vision, you might have a good mission, you might have good at heart, you might be passionate about solving educational problems, but if your content is not good, it's not going to pay and it's not going to bring any positive impact in the long term, right? So what you need to do if you're creating a learning platform or creating any form of learning or anything, you need to ensure that you have quality content, right? Start with what you know you can do and do well. Quality content matters a lot because that's what we really need. Technology is just a vehicle, it's just the driving force, it's just the vehicle, right? At the end of the core thing, right, is the content. So you have to ensure that you are delivering a good content, you ensure that you're developing a good content. You have to be very, very serious about it and giving so much effort and so much pay so much attention to beyond the technological tool or whatever thing it is, have a good content because when you have that, then you can now start talking about okay, how can you improve your tech and all of that. Yeah.
wow, I think you nailed it for real. Content is king. Beyond every other thing, beyond the passion, uh, beyond what's it called again, the funding, the technology involved. If you're not serving quality content, if you're not serving an experience that the users can relate to it, that is the teachers, the students, the academic administrators, and commissions. If you don't serve something that is quality, you might as well not be doing anything at all. Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for coming around and doing this with us. And to everyone watching live and would be watching later, you can go back to the previous videos from day one to catch up on how this journey started because today is the last day of this event. Um, Today is the last day of this event, and from next week we will start the paid training, and that will last till August. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us on this program. Let's keep building, let's keep innovating, let's keep solving Africa's education problems. So help us God. Thank you, and God bless us.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.